2025 season, what's a successful season for the Atlanta Falcons and Michael Penix?
The postseason.
No
We got to
doubt.
get in the postseason.
No
For
doubt.
sure. That's
Ultimate
it.
goal.
Whatever happens.
It starts week 1.
Yeah. We got to make it happen.
The last time the Falcons made the playoffs was a season after that tumultuous Super Bowl 51 loss where they lost that game after leading 28-3 at halftime and allowing the Patriots to score 31 unanswered points, winning Super Bowl 51 in overtime. That was devastating, and that was the year they had Matt Ryan in an MVP season, the same year they had offensive coordinator Kyle Shanahan, who then after the Super Bowl left to be the 49ers head coach, and they lost in a divisional round against the Philadelphia Eagles, who would go on to win Super Bowl 52. But since then, let's just be frank and keep it a buck. The Atlanta Falcons have been the definition of mid. And in this video, we're going to be answering the question if the Atlanta Falcons will finally make the playoffs in this upcoming 2025 season. And last year, it was a little bit better in terms of their start in the 2024-25 season under first-year head coach Raheem Morris, who had previously been with the franchise as a assistant head coach / passing game coordinator in 2015 and 16, and returning to that franchise as being the head coach last year in 2024 after being the defensive coordinator of the Rams. He looked to reinvigorate the team and imprint his culture on the franchise, which he certainly did, being a defensive-minded head coach, but that defense was still flawed. And overall, even though despite the Falcons started off the season 6-3 throughout the first 9 weeks of their season, they didn't went on to lose 4 consecutive games. And there was a stretch where Kirk Cousins threw 9 interceptions in a 5-week span, which ended up leading Michael Penix Jr., their first-round pick, who was surprisingly taken in the first round of the 2024 draft. After Kirk Cousins signed a 4-year, $180 million deal, the Falcons still decided to draft Penix in the 2024 draft as a long-term answer at the position. He would go on to start in week 16 in the Giants and showed some solid flashes, but it was definitely a short span of him starting only 3 games to finish the 2025 season. And even before that though, his first game technically was against the Seahawks, where he came in the game. And throughout the season last year, which was very short in the vacuum, he only started 5 games last year. He had a quarterback rating of essentially 79 with 775 passing yards, 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And there was an interception particularly against the Giants where technically it wasn't his fault. It was on Kyle Pitts for the pick, but of course it still counts against the quarterback. And that's why when you're watching football and really analyzing the game, you can't necessarily just say that every interception is on the quarterback. A tip ball or tips and overthrows, things of that nature. But I think Penix Jr., he has a lot of foundation to build on to be the potential quarterback 1 for the Falcons going forward in the future. And he was an older rookie last year. He's already 25 years old now, turned 25 in May. But if you look at his collegiate career, even despite dealing with some injuries when he was a part of the Indiana Hoosiers, but in his tenure at Washington, especially in the 2023 season where they made the college football playoffs, Michael Penix Jr. filled up the stat sheet, throwing for nearly 5,000 passing yards in the 2023 season with 36 passing touchdowns and 11 interceptions, having a completion percentage of 65.4, and also finished as a Heisman candidate that same season. And even in the year before that, in his first season in Washington, he had over 4,600 passing yards, 31 passing touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. So he's shown, when healthy, Michael Penix Jr. has one of the most beautiful and accurate throws in football. In college and in NFL, he's looking to continue that type of reputation and that consistency on an Atlanta Falcons offense under now going into his second season as offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, who has a solid regime coming from the Los Angeles Rams and Sean McVay coaching tree. But it'll be interesting to see if this offense evolves, especially now being tailored around a Michael Penix Jr. being the starting quarterback. We know the acquiesce of weapons that the Falcons have at their disposal: Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Tyler Algier, Kyle Pitts, even though that he might not have necessarily been the type of tight end 1 potential that everyone has thought that he would be after being drafted in the 2021 draft. Regardless of that fact, the Falcons have a ton of weapons, and they also have the 8th ranked offensive line going into the 2025 season. So there's a lot of continuity there, but the biggest question mark and potential ascension for this team to determine if they can make the playoffs in 2025 and maybe even win the NFC South in 2025 is their defense. To be brief, the Falcons, in terms of from a statistics standpoint, they were really all over the place. They ranked 23rd in the league in total yards allowed per game with an average of 345. Passing yards allowed, they ranked 5th, which is solid, and they allowed 4.5 rushing yards per carry. But overall, their rushing defense was ranked 15th, so in the middle of the pack. Their scoring defense ranked 23rd, and red zone defense an abysmal 28th. Like I said, their defensive stats have been all over the place. And in this draft, they were very adamant and aggressive on adding to that defense in terms of an edge perspective to help really reset and be more potent in terms of having a stout pass rush. With the 15th pick overall in the 2025 NFL draft in the first round, they drafted linebacker / edge Jalon Walker out of Georgia. So really, he's not traveling far at all to be a part of this Falcons squad. And in the 2024 season, he had 60 combined tackles, 11 TFLs, and 6.5 sacks. Going to be a young edge that can add some pass rush to this room. The Atlanta Falcons defense, which ranked between 26th to 29th in terms of pass rush win rate percentage in the 2024 season. But they did something even more aggressive and unexpected later in the first round, trading up using their second round pick from this year's draft and their 2026 first round pick to get back in the first round and trade with the Los Angeles Rams so they could draft edge James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. And I think that Raheem Morris' connection with the Los Angeles Rams played a great role in the Rams agreeing to the deal of allowing the Falcons to have their first round pick, but also it was a smart move by the Rams in my opinion too, because the Falcons could have potentially, which I'll talk about throughout the video, a similar type of season that they had last year. That'll be an additional first round pick that they can have to, who knows, maybe draft a successor for a Matthew Stafford in the Los Angeles Rams. But with that being said though, focusing on the Falcons, they drafted a James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee who had 38 total tackles last season, 13 TFLs, and 7.5 sacks. So those are two young players right there who are nearly adding 13 to 14 total sacks of production to your room off rip and nearly 30 TFLs from the previous season that they had in college to the Falcons edge room that needed some reinforcements to say the least. And I think that'll play a good role in their defense being improved from being all over the place to being more consistent and potentially elevating from being middle in the pack to being one of the better and more respectable defenses in the 2025 season. Their secondary is also led by Jesse Bates III, safety who had a really good season for them in 2024, having 102 total tackles last year, 4 forced fumbles, 10 pass deflections, and 4 interceptions. So he was and still is a great catalyst and great factor for this team defensively. You look at what they did in the offseason, signing a Leonard Floyd on a 1-year, $10 million contract after being with the 49ers. That's a really solid pickup to add to this linebacker / edge room as well, in addition to James Pierce Jr. and the Jalon Walker in that room. They have a veteran like a Caden Ellis who had 5 sacks and 1 forced fumble and an interception last year as well too. So they certainly have some pieces to contribute to this defense, but it's about them really building coherently to improve overall. And I believe Raheem Morris, he is certainly the type of coach who can elevate their defense for sure. Even if you look at the Rams statistics defensively in 2023, when he was a defensive coordinator there, their defense ranked 13th in the league and recorded 42 sacks and 16 interceptions during the regular season. So he has a foundation and type of scheme where he utilizes a fluctuating 3-4 and 4-3 based scheme, also with a ton of simulated pressures, and shows a lot of different fronts and a lot of different sub packages. I think that can be able to help the Falcons be multiple in not only the NFC South but in the NFC overall and all their opponents in the 2025 season to really improve on the defensive end to complement their offense so they can be more potent of a team overall. But before we break down the Atlanta Falcons playoff chances for the 2025 season even more, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram / Twitter and X at SwaggyRuss and TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for shorts, reels, and all content and things of that nature. More podcast information on the way, guys. This week, genuinely, I'm going to be able to have all of these season previews so far that I've recorded on my podcast platforms wherever you get your podcast. So stay tuned for that. And like I continue to say on every video, if I haven't talked about your favorite NFL team yet, after this video, we have 14 more teams to preview, and your team will certainly be covered after we do all 32. So with that being said though, let's go on and answer the question if the Atlanta Falcons will finally make a playoff run in this 2025 NFL season. So if you haven't checked out my last season preview video already, previewing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the 2025 season, check that out after this. But similarly to like I said about them, they have a ton of weapons on their offensive side, and I mentioned it briefly a little bit earlier in the intro, but the Falcons also have weapons galore in their offensive room too. Let's start off in the backfield with their first round pick from the 2023 NFL draft, 8th overall, in Bijan Robinson, who was a very explosive running back coming out of UT. In the past couple of seasons, in his rookie year and last year, he showed why he was a first round pick, and right now you can make the argument as a top 5 running back in the league going into his 3rd season. Last year in particular showed that from a running game and receiving standpoint. 304 carries for 1,456 rushing yards, averaging nearly 5 yards per carry and 14 rushing touchdowns. And then in the receiving game, he had 61 receptions for 431 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. So a total of 1,887 all-purpose yards, getting close to 1,900 and closer to 2,000 all-purpose yards in his 2024 season, and being arguably the most dangerous weapon for the Falcons offense last season, and is looking to build on that even more. In addition to that, they have a Drake London at the wide receiver position, who you can make the argument is near or at that top 10 level in terms of all NFL receivers in the NFL. Last season, he had 100 receptions for 1,271 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns, averaging nearly 13 yards per reception. And even throughout uncertain quarterback play in his first couple of seasons with players like a Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke, all quarterbacks of that nature, he was still consistent and had 4 touchdowns his rookie season, had 905 receiving yards in 2023, and last year he had his best season overall with nearly 1,300 receiving yards and those 100 receptions. So he's looking to even get better, and he's still only 24 years old. But man, the most intriguing but disappointing, not necessarily saying that he's been bad, but it's been a Kyle Pitts who had his best season in his rookie year, playing 17 games, having 68 receptions for over 1,000 receiving yards, averaging 15.1 yards per reception and only 1 touchdown. But he had a great impact in his rookie year, and ever since been disappointing. In 2022, he dealt with some injuries, so I'll cut him some slack there. That's when he had only 28 receptions for 356 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. But in 2023 and 2024, both of those seasons he's played 17 games, and both of those seasons he's only had over 600 receiving yards. Particularly in 2023, 53 receptions for 667 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. And last year, 47 receptions for 602 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. I just believe, and a lot of people know, that he has the skill set to be better than that. He was a 4th pick in the 2021 draft for a reason, coming out of Florida. His last year coming out of Florida, yes, he didn't have the most receiving yards, but his impact was felt, and he was very explosive as a tight end in the 2020 season, in that COVID year. Only playing 8 games, but had 43 receptions for 770 receiving yards. But here's the kicker: he averaged 18 yards per reception and had 12 receiving touchdowns, and finished even 10th in Heisman voting. I know the Heisman is the Final Four, but still, like, he had a great impact that year. And like I said, his rookie year, it was explosive, but the 3 seasons since have been a lot to be desired, and this is his last year of his rookie deal. So the Falcons are going to have an interesting choice to make, depending on the success that he has this season, on whether to extend him afterwards or let him walk in free agency. But at the same time, they can use a franchise tag on him as well after 2025, which isn't a popular thing for players or teams to do, but it just depends, and we'll see. And if he has a dominant season in 2025, though, the Falcons will have no choice but to extend him. That would be the best case scenario for them, because if Kyle Pitts can be unlocked and be one of the better tight ends or best tight ends in the league in this season, that means that the Falcons are having real success and being even more explosive as an overall football team. By the way, I think that a guy like a Darnell Mooney at the wide receiver position is one of the most underrated receivers in the league. And while he's widely successful being at that slot receiver position, he's also utilized a lot on the outside, and he's had a lot of explosive plays, particularly last year, where Mooney had 21 receptions of over 20 plus yards, and he also had 4 touchdowns of 15 plus yards, which ranked 2nd in the NFL. But if you look at Darnell Mooney's stats from last season, he had 64 receptions for nearly 1,000 receiving yards, having 992, and 5 receiving touchdowns, averaging 15.5 yards per reception. I think he's a perfect complement to a wide receiver in a Drake London. To make defense is also respectable and honest, and it's also a Tyler Algier is a perfect complement to a Bijan Robinson, as Algier had 137 carries for 644 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns last season. So this team, they are very versatile in terms of the type of weapons that they have. Even other receivers to a lesser extent who had great impacts on this roster last year: Ray McLeod, who had 62 receptions for 686 receiving yards and a touchdown, and a Kadero Hodge, who had that amazing game-winning touchdown against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Week 5. I just think this team is very deep, has a lot of depth in their offense, and that can be a real catalyst to why they improve this upcoming season. From a strength of schedule perspective, the Falcons ranked 13th, so that's a solid thing for them going into this year. But even though they have the 13th easiest schedule, that doesn't always mean that you're automatically going to be one of the most improved teams in the league going into the next season, because that's just based off of team successes in the 2024 season, and teams are constantly looking to improve and get better. And when we look at their schedule, they open up off rip in Week 1 against their divisional rival in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who in Tampa Bay, they've won 4 consecutive NFC South titles. They open up against them at home in Week 1, so that's going to be a pivotal game in terms of their divisional race for the 2025 season. And yes, the Falcons, they indeed did sweep the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year in the season series in 2024, but ultimately it didn't make a difference because they still ended up collapsing, and the Bucs seized the opportunity to reclaim the first spot in the NFC South and winning the division again. So the Falcons, not only do they have to try to beat the Buccaneers again, but they need to remain consistent in terms of their other matchups that they play against, because it's more than just beating your divisional opponents. It's about taking care of business and eating your breakfast against teams that you should beat. They also split the season series with the New Orleans Saints last year, and the Saints, they were 5-12 last season and had the 9th pick in the 2020 2025 draft. And then in combination with that, they split the season series with the Panthers, and they had an opportunity to win the division in week 18 last year, and they lost that final game 44-38. So the Falcons, they have to take care of their business in division because they had a 3-3 record last year. But looking at their schedule this season in 2025, like I said, it ranks 13th easiest in terms of the comparison with other teams in the league. Bucks in week 1, that's a tough test, but we're going to see where they're at in week 1. Then they play against the Vikings in week 2 on Sunday Night Football. That's not going to be an easy game at all. But like I said, we're going to be able to see what they're made of. Week 3, they play against the Panthers. The Panthers, they'll be improved, I believe, but the Falcons, they should still be better than them. If they lose to them in week 3, that's going to tell a lot about the Falcons, in my opinion. Even though it's on the road, you should still beat that team, regardless of the situation. Then going on, they play against the Falcons. A tough team to play against. I think the Falcons will still be a perennial playoff. I think that the Commanders will still be a perennial playoff. Then in week 4, they play against the Washington Commanders. That'll be a tough game as well. I think the Commanders will be a perennial playoff threat again, like last year. Even if they take a little step back, which I think a lot of people expect from them, and I kind of do too, but we'll see. That won't be an easy game at all, but we saw them face off last year, and the Falcons lost that game 24-30 in overtime, but that was a really competitive game. We should probably expect something similar there. Then they play against the Buffalo Bills. That's going to be a tough game for sure. The Bills being one of the best teams in the AFC every single year, being a real Super Bowl contender, and also having the 2024 reigning MVP and Josh Allen. That's going to be a test for their defense, but overall their team in general too, because their offense is going to have to show up in that game too, and we'll see also what Michael Penix Jr. does against a Sean McDermott defense. Then they play against the 49ers. Another tough matchup. The Dolphins, I think they can beat them. I'm not going to lie. I'm just not really big on the Miami Dolphins going into this year, and they could really have real questions over there in Miami and South Beach after the 2025 season. But the Falcons, that's a winnable game. They play against the Patriots. That's also a game that they can win too. Even though the Patriots, they will be improved under Mike Vrabel, they can still beat that team. Same thing goes with the Indianapolis Colts, regardless. And they're playing against the Colts in Berlin, Germany, one of those global games. They can win that game too. They should win, regardless if it's Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson is starting. Then it plays the Panthers again, the Saints. Those teams, in my opinion, with the Saints and Panthers, they should have at least a combined record of 3-1 playing against those teams 4 times. They shouldn't be splitting with those teams because, especially the Saints, I think the Saints are going to be terrible this upcoming year. There's no disrespect to that franchise, and in a couple of videos we're going to be previewing them. But the Falcons, they should not be losing to a team like that like they did last year, and that played a role in them missing the playoffs. But further on with that, they play against the Jets. I think the Jets are going to be a really run-heavy team that can be hard to play against for defenses, but the Falcons, they should still be able to beat them, in my opinion, from an offensive perspective. Then they play against the Seahawks, who is going to be a competitive team too. They won 10 games last year despite missing the playoffs. The Buccaneers for a second time in Week 15. That can also be a game that'll potentially tell who's going to win the division in the AFC South, and I think that's why intentionally they put that on Sunday Night Football. And then they play against the Cardinals in Week 16. Not an easy game at all. I think the Cardinals defense is going to be very potent. The Rams in Week 17, and then finally finishing off against the New Orleans Saints in Week 18. So I think that the Falcons, they have a good opportunity to, like I said, maybe finally win the NFC South for the first time as a 2016 season. In addition to that, but I will say though, they have an early bye week, and I think a lot of teams hate that. In my opinion, the best time to have a bye week is between weeks 10 to 14, something in that area. But the Falcons, they have a week 5 bye this year, so they're going to be going through it throughout the final 13 weeks of the season. So it's going to be a tell of a war of attrition, who can stay healthy, and how consistent and balanced this team will be going into that stretch of the season, going into that long stretch of the season after their bye week. With that though, I can only see the Falcons being 9-8 and maybe 10-7, and really they can also be 8-9 again like last season. Just to me, I mentioned something about earlier, of course, your strength of schedule being determined by teams that played in the playoffs, having an impact of a percentage in terms of teams that made the playoffs in the previous season. They're playing against only 4 teams that made the playoffs last season, so yeah, for sure. But they're playing against a tough team in the Cardinals, which I think that can really run the football down their throat. And yes, the defensive side will be improved by the Falcons, but I still think that they're going to go through growing pains. They play against the Rams, who were almost in the NFC Championship game. They play against the Seahawks, who won 10 games last year. They play against the 49ers, who I think the 49ers might be right back in the playoffs after having an injury-riddled season last year in 2024. That's going to be a tough game for them in Week 7. So I just see this team ranging from 8 to 10 wins this season. If they can win 10 games, I think they'll have a real shot to make the playoffs. But also with that though, if you look at the Seattle Seahawks, who the Falcons do play against this season, look at them for an example. You can win 10 games and still not only lose the division, but also miss the playoffs. So you don't want to be in that bubble as well. Yes, 10 wins, that'll be a 2-win improvement for that franchise in Atlanta, but the goal for them should be winning the NFC South finally for the first time in nearly 10 years. But if not that, then just making the playoffs as a wild card, because they haven't been there in so long. Like I said, tied for the second longest playoff drought in the league with the Carolina Panthers. They want to get back, man, because this team is talented enough to do so. Like I said, so many pieces in there. Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, Darnell Mooney, Ray McLeod, Kyle Pitts. And then Michael Penix Jr. going into his second year, starting off this year. I think that it's important for the Falcons to really have a lot of success starting off early this year, just to show that they're a real threat in the NFC to be playoff contenders overall. But if I'm answering a question to this video right now, though, will the Falcons finally make the playoffs in the 2025 season? I'm going to say no. And hopefully that's not an indictment on how the Falcons view a Raheem Morris. I think if anything, they'll be improved in terms of from a statistics standpoint. And like I said, they could win 8 to 10 games. And maybe that'll help them in comparison to other wild card teams that can potentially come from the NFC North, the NFC West, the NFC East, and other divisions of that nature. But I just don't see it yet for this 2025 season. I think if anything, 2026 could be potentially the season for them to finally get over the hump and break that playoff drought. But who knows? Like I said, it just is a lot of factors in determining if they will make the playoffs, because it's not even only the division, which I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will win the division for a 5th consecutive season. And I talked about that in my preview with them. But if I look at it in comparison to other wild card teams, if I'm going to pick, for example, if the Lions win a division again or the Green Bay Packers finally win a division, am I going to pick the Atlanta Falcons over the Vikings or the Packers or even the Lions as a wild card? No, I'm not. For me, it really just depends on how great Michael Penix Jr. can be in year 2, because if he's very dominant and can be a great force multiplier in his first full year as a starting quarterback in the NFL, then that can change a lot of things. And then I could be wrong in this video and saying that the Falcons could potentially win a division and be a real serious playoff threat in the NFC. But like I said, I would still pick the Buccaneers to win the division right now at the recording of this video, but let's see how things go throughout the 2025 NFL season. But with that being said, though, guys, let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. Do y'all think that the Atlanta Falcons will make the playoffs finally in the 2025 season, or are you similar minded to me, thinking that they're close but a little far away from making the playoffs and winning the division and things of that nature too? Y'all let me know what y'all think about the Falcons in this 2025 NFL season. We're halfway done now with the NFC South. The next team that we'll be previewing is the New Orleans Saints, and that'll be certainly a team to talk about. And then after that, wrapping up the NFC South with the Carolina Panthers, and then moving on to the AFC South, talking about the Houston Texans. So stay tuned for that and a lot of future teams upcoming. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter /XSWaggyRuss, TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for all videos like that. Like I said, more videos in this series coming soon. More videos also about the NBA, pop culture, all videos like that too as well, guys. So y'all stay tuned. Be blessed. We are going to continue to keep growing, Lord willing, and a lot of great things to come. So certainly stay tuned. Y'all keep being blessed. Keep Jesus Christ at the center of your lives always. Know that he loves you. You matter. You have purpose, and you are here for a reason, guys. So y'all keep being legendary. I love y'all, guys. Thank you for your support always. Y'all have a good one. Peace.